This lesson is congruent figures. The goal is to recognize congruent figures and their corresponding parts, and the standard is similarity, right triangles, trig, number 5. What I want you to understand from this lesson is that you can determine whether two figures are congruent by examining their corresponding parts. We've learned that congruent means they're the exact same size and shape. So if you have two figures that are congruent, you could slide them, you could flip them, or you could turn them. And in this lesson, we're going to determine how to tell if geometric figures are congruent. The most important thing when you are naming congruent polygons is getting the letters correct. If you look at this little trapezoid that's shown below, we have angles A, B, C, and D. And this has been flipped over, and we have 4 other angles, E, F, G, and H. Now, if you notice that angle A and angle D are on the short side, and over here, E and H are on the short side. So when you name these, you have to be very careful and make them in the same order. So if you notice, line AB is congruent to EF. So I have here, here. We started at the short end and went up, started at the short end and went up. Angle A is congruent to angle E, as they show right here. So you have to list the vertices or the corners in the same order on the first one as you do the second one. So we're going from here, the short end, up, down, and back to the short end. Over here, we're going from the short end up, down, and back to the short end. So now we can say that polygon ABCD is congruent to polygon EFGH. The letters are in the correct order. This question says, if triangle WYS is congruent to triangle MKV, what are the congruent corresponding parts? Figures have two sets of corresponding parts. The first one is sides, and the second one is angles. Now, because it's a triangle, we'll have 3 sides and 3 angles. So the first side is going to be, I look at the first letter of the first one, and WY is the side, and it is congruent to the first 2 letters of the next one, which is MK. Now I'm going to start at the middle letter. YS is congruent to KV. And then I'm going to look at the last letter and the first letter. SW is congruent to VM. So I have 3 sides on each triangle. The next one is the angles. The first one, angle W, is congruent to angle M. I look at the middle one. Angle Y is congruent to angle K. And the third one, angle S, is congruent to angle V. Now, if I was using a square or a 4-sided polygon, I'd have 4 sides and 4 angles. A pentagon, 5 sides, 5 angles. I think you see the picture. Here's your first practice problem. If HIJK is congruent to LMNO, what are the congruent corresponding parts? And if you'll notice, there's a place for you to do congruent sides and congruent angles. Here are 2 congruent triangles, and it says to complete the congruent statement. Triangle HGF is congruent to. So I'm going to look at how this has been done. So we're starting at H, going to G, and going up to F. So we're going along the 20-yard mark first. And according to the next one, going along the 20 would be M, N, O. So that's going to be our answer. Triangle HGF is congruent to triangle MNO. Here's your practice problem 2. Complete the congruence statement. ONML is congruent to, and you have to match up the sides and the angles to complete that congruent statement. Practice problem 3. What are the corresponding parts of this figure below, and select all that apply. So you're going to have to take each one individual and mark whether or not, if it is congruent, go ahead and mark that answer. All right, it says that triangle MON is congruent to WXY. So I have my MON, and that is congruent to WXY. It says, what is the measurement of angle N? That's this angle right here. So N is my third letter in the triangle. And so I'm looking for the third letter in the other one, which is Y. I look at the measurement of Y. That's 78 degrees. So the measurement of angle N must also be 78 degrees. Here's your practice problem. It says these figures are congruent. What is NO? That means they want to know the length from N to O. Match it up to the other shape to get that number. The third angle theorem states that if two angles of one triangle are congruent, then the third angle must also be congruent. So if we know that the measurement of angle A is congruent to the measurement of angle D, and the measurement of angle B is congruent to the measurement of angle E, then it just stands to reason that angle C and angle F have the same measurement. This question says, is there enough information to prove that these shapes are congruent? Well, I only have one angle and one side length on each one, and that's not enough to tell whether or not the angles or those shapes are congruent. Here I have two trapezoids, and it's asking if these shapes are congruent. When I take a look at them, I notice that I have four sides. 35 is my longest side, 35 is my longest side, 17 is my shortest. Both the other two sides are 21. I have two congruent angles up here and two congruent angles down there. They're the same measurements as these. So the answer to this is yes, these two trapezoids are congruent. Practice 5 says, are these shapes congruent? Be sure to look at tick marks and angle measurements before you decide. So, where are you on the scale? I don't get it, I sort of get it, I've got this, or I'm so good I can teach this. If you're down here, go watch the video again. If you're one of these two places, that's a good thing. And if you're way up here, then you're going to be just fine. And for my final thought on this lesson, know that this is where I would like to be, sitting right in that chair.